The pictures on this tape here begin with my days in the Army. It was at the first time that I got a camera that I could take slide pictures with. They also include other activities that I did on my own that didn't involve the family or scouts in particular. These people here are important because we took quite a few trips together while we were stationed at Fort Bliss, and that's me, Bill Lucas on the left, Bob Manley, Bob Went, and his wife Ruth, and Jess Whitten. Standing next to me here is Bill Tejan. He was the fellow taking the previous picture. That's Bob Manley taking a picture of me. During World War II, I was working at the Sperry Gyroscope Company in Garden City, Long Island in New York. And every 6 months we went into New York City to get a physical, and then at the last minute the deferment would come by. In 1945 they said, well, we're not going to fight your deferment. We haven't been winning them lately. And so I got drafted into the Army, and I went to basic training at Camp Roberts and left there a week before the training was over to come to Fort Bliss. One of the things that they did back at Sperry is they made arrangements so that we could get to this Army Ground Forces Center at Fort Bliss, which was anti-aircraft and missile test facilities. I got there in the middle of the night, and when I woke up, Bob Went was in the bunk next to me, and Bob Manley was in the barracks down there, and Bill Tejan and Jess Whitten were the Sperry field representatives on the equipment. The equipment that we were going to be tested was the one that I'd worked on for 2.5 years. So we were all pretty familiar with each other and with the equipment, and we finagled the 3 of us that were in the Army to go take a trip back to New York to pick this equipment up and bring it to Fort Bliss. But these are mainly associated with trips we took during the summer because all the holidays came on 3-day weekends. This is a picture in El Paso looking at the mountain that comes down, and on the lower end of this they have a road that drives up there and for a lookout over the town of El Paso. And one fellow and I climbed up to the top of that mountain just outside of Fort Bliss and walked down the ridge to the lookout point. This is a picture of the swimming pool at Fort Bliss. I used to go horseback riding occasionally, and this is one of our horseback riding trips. Before I left New York, I learned to fly, and when I was out here at Fort Bliss, I did a lot of flying. I took a lot of pictures around El Paso there, but these 2 pictures here are the only 2 I can find that were taken from the airplane. This is an aerial view of some part of El Paso or the country just outside of it. While I was stationed at Fort Bliss, supposedly testing this anti-aircraft tracking device that we built in New York when I was working there, we set up our site out 18 miles east of White Sands, New Mexico, where they were testing the V-2 rockets. And we witnessed the first German firing of the V-2 rocket in the United States. For some reason, we had to go over to White Sands on communication problem. And while I was there, I don't remember hearing a word of English spoken. On the day of the firing, we had the tracker set up there, and people were sitting there and looking at the instruments, and they were supposed to read over the intercom what their instrument was supposed to say. And if the fellow reading the elevation dial said the elevation should go up and then eventually come down, and the fellow reading the azimuth dial says the azimuth should move slowly to the right and track the missile. And the person reading the range dial should have read that the range didn't change very much, but should have gone out. And so we were all set there ready to go, and we had our earphones on and everything, and we saw the blast of the rocket going up, and this is what you heard over the earphones. Can't read the range dial, can't read the range dial, azimuth's not moving, azimuth's not moving, elevation's going according to schedule, and this indicates the missile's coming right at us. And so we got out there, and all of a sudden we saw this big explosion out in the desert there, all this dust and everything, where they'd brought the missile down because it wasn't going where it should have been. And we were just calming down from that when this big wind came through and just about blew us all over. These are pictures taken at the bullfights over in Juarez. We went over there on several occasions. I can't remember all the particulars about the bullfight, so well, I think the pictures are pretty much in order the way that the fight progresses. This guy is the picador. He has a blunt spear that he jabs into the bull and tries to keep him away from the horse. And this is a picador. These sticks he's poking in there have barbs so that, and they're decorated and stuff, and they hang into the bull for the rest of the fight. This is a picture of some of the cape work that they do. This is where he's lunging this sword in for the kill. If you notice off to the side there is a guy with a rake, and they rake all the blood down into the sand so you can't see it. This is a picture of El Capitan, which is the highest mountain in Texas. This was taken on our trip going down to Big Bend National Park. We went down to a town called Alpine that advertised itself as the largest town in the largest county in the largest state in the United States. Of course, Alaska wasn't a state then. When we were in Alpine, we were talking to either the service station attendant or somebody there about going down to Big Bend, and he said, well, what you really ought to do, he says, you can take this road and go over on the other side of the mountain and then cross over down at Big Bend and come up the other side. And that sounded like a good idea to us, except we got down here and it was raining and the road was slick and we passed several cars stuck that couldn't get back up, and so we didn't know what to do except to keep going. This is a town of Terlingua, Texas, and this is a company town, and they mine feldspar and refine mercury, and all of the supplies and everything that come in and out of this town are done by airplane, on the company airplane. And this is sort of a general purpose building. It has a post office, a general store, a little restaurant and stuff, and we took one look at this and said, gee, I don't even want to buy ice cream here, and so took off down to the river. This is a view of Terlingua. In the background you can see where they're doing the mining and stuff. We got down to the river, and it didn't look like we were going to get across it, and so we stopped back here because it's kind of muddy out there, and so we came back to the town to see if we could get some help to get across the river, and they said, well, there's a highway maintenance guy around if you can find him, and so we finally located him. He says, well, if the river will go down another 6 or 8 inches, he says, I'll get you across. So we went down to the river and put out markers to see whether the river was rising or falling. And we came back a little later to look at the markers, and there weren't anywhere to be found. This is a look up the stream of the river. This is looking the other direction along the river. While we were trying to survey for our markers, this guy on the donkey came along there, and he didn't even lose a stride getting across that river. You can see the roadway up there, that there hasn't been any traffic up there since the river's been up quite a bit higher. This is another view of Terlingua looking out over the valley. It's starting to cloud up. Since we couldn't get across the river, we went and explored around the town there and the mine and so forth. Long towards real late afternoon, this is what we saw out there in the sky. It didn't rain there at Terlingua, but it sure rained someplace else. We came back in the evening up to the restaurant, and they had one table set out in the center of the restaurant. It had exactly the right number of places set at the table for us, a nice white tablecloth and everything. I guess the guy that ran the restaurant knew that we would be back. I guess I should finish my story before we go on with this one, but the guy that ran the place was an ex-Navy cook, and he supplied us with one really nice dinner that night. And then he said, well, I've got a few cabins out in back that the dignitaries use, and I can let you have those for tonight. And he says, now this lady is one of your wives, isn't she? Bob Wint spoke up and said, yeah, that was his wife, so he let us use the rooms. And we sat there all day the next day, and along towards late afternoon, the highway guy caught up with us, and he said, come on, let's get going. And he says, well, the river hasn't gone down. He says, I know, but you guys said you had to be to camp by tonight, so let's go. And he had a Mexican fellow with him, and they got about halfway across the river, and they got stuck, but the old Mexican jumped out, and they had a big log in the back. He propped it up under the back, and the guy lifted the dump bed, and that jacked him up out of the thing, and they pushed the rocks down under the wheels, and they did this a couple of times, and they got through. And he said, okay, drive as far as you can go, and this was it. And he hooked this cable on and pulled us the rest of the way out. This is all we got to see at Big Bend National Park. This is the junction of the Terlingua Creek with the Rio Grande River. I understand that this trip is down through this section of the Rio Grande is quite a popular boat trip. This is another trip we took up through to try to get to Mesa Verde in one 3-day weekend. And this is in New Mexico heading north. This is a picture of the open pit copper mine at Silver City, New Mexico. I don't think the sun has come up yet. This is shiprock out there that you can see for miles and miles, I guess in every direction. And we decided we'd see if we could drive up to it. Now we're getting a little closer here now. It's a little closer. We had a hard time finding roads that were going in this direction. This is our closest view. Our next stop was at the Petrified Forest in Arizona. This is one of the pieces of petrified wood there. We then went up to the Painted Desert, which is just north of the Petrified Forest. Our next stop should have been Mesa Verde, and in fact it was the next stop that we did, but I guess all the Mesa Verde pictures got cannibalized for other trips and I couldn't find any more. Our last stop was here at the Chaco Canyon Indian ruins, and this is Pueblo Bonita. This was taken from up on top of the cliff behind it. I suspect some of these pictures have been taken for other trips also. In December, one of the things I should tell about Fort Bliss, that I learned square dancing in New York, so I picked up square dancing when I got here to El Paso. And we used to go to the square dances every week, and in order to get your favorite partner for the square dances, you had to get right in there and get the first dance in order to get her reserved for the square dances. And there were two of us that went out there, and we were the only ones on the floor of this big dance hall, and we bumped into each other. But the day I got my orders to go to Alaska, I got an invitation to join the Bluebonnet Square Dancers, which is one of the elite square dance clubs in the nation. But I couldn't take it. The other thing that I did at Fort Bliss is I took up shooting, and my first experience, well, we'll go into the shooting later, but this is McCord, I think it's McCord Field at Tacoma, Washington, on my way to Alaska. I had to wait for 2 or 3 days before I could get on the airplane here, so I had lots of time to just take pictures, and this is servicing one of the airplanes before they take off. Today we took a bus ride up to Mount Rainier, and it was so cloudy and snowy we couldn't see anything but the edge of the bus just about. But this is airplane loading, ready to go out. And off here now. These are pictures taken from the airplane flying from Tacoma, Washington to Fairbanks, Alaska. When we left Tacoma, it was 78 degrees, and they had to either carry or wear this heavy parka overcoat and boots. And with all the other stuff you had to carry, the only way I could figure out was to put them on. But when we landed in Anchorage, it was 21 degrees below zero, a matter of 8 hours later. Now I think we're getting up the coast of Alaska here. I haven't figured out what this picture's doing this spot here for, because I could never be out like that at Anchorage, Alaska, and it wouldn't be snowing in Tacoma, so I don't know where this was taken. When we got to Anchorage, they stopped to service the airplane, and then they couldn't get one of the engines started, so we had to stay overnight, and I tried 2 other airplanes before they got one to take off. This is leaving Anchorage here. This is flying out over the tundra. I think this is the range of mountains that Mount McKinley is in. This is Ladd Field and Fairbanks as we're coming over, and I haven't figured out exactly where we stayed. It wasn't on the airbase proper, but right close to it. Snake-like thing there is the Chena Slough that runs through the valley here. Right down in the very bottom of this picture is Fairbanks. We arrived here. I actually got here towards evening, and the guy said, well, I'll stick you in a temporary barracks for tonight, and then we'll move you over to your permanent quarters tomorrow. And I got up the next morning and looked out the door, and this is what I was greeted with. There was the most exercised fire department that I think I've ever seen any place. There was a major fire nearly every day during the winter. At one point, the telephone company building burned down, and for the rest of our stay there was no telephone communications. The ham radio operators set up communication spots throughout the town and around. I was with this Army Ground Forces Task Force Frigid on the equipment test staff. A particular thing that we were testing were anti-aircraft guns and directors. My particular job was with the directors, and I had my test equipment inside, and the equipment I was testing was outside the building, so we didn't have to go out in the field like the guys that did the actual firing of the guns. They were doing some tests on major caliber anti-aircraft guns. This is a 90 and 105 and 120 millimeter anti-aircraft guns, which normally recoil about 48 inches, and they fired one of those guns once and it recoiled a half inch, and that gun was never used again. This is our full cold weather gear, and we have mucklucks on the bottom, and you stuff, they have a felt boot, and you stuff as many socks as you can into them, and then just wrap this canvas bag around them, which is the mucklucks. The pants are Levi's with a sealskin sewed around the legs up to the waist, and the parka has a real fur face mask. The rest of it's manufactured, and the gloves, you can put 3 or 4 pair of gloves inside those mittens. This shows how the frost collects around your face. I can't wear my glasses in this weather, otherwise they get frosted up, and I'm surprised that I haven't got a scarf wrapped around my nose, because it usually froze. I think when this picture taken, it was about 50 or 60 below zero. We had Quonset huts to live in, and the one that I was in, there was a broken window right over my bed, but that didn't make much difference. When it really got cold enough to worry about it, it plugged up with ice. So But if you wanted a drink of water, I always kept my canteen under the bed, and if you wanted a drink of water, you just put it on the stove and thaw it out, because under the bed it would always be frozen. But the movie, they were going to have the press come up to take pictures of our activity and everything, and we had this real cold spell, and they said there'll be nobody in the barracks, so everybody had to go out in the field, and this is our tent. We had a stove in the middle of the tent with a chimney that went up through the top there. We had that stove red hot and the chimney up a little ways, and this is as much as the snow we could melt off from it. We had 20 consecutive days where the temperature didn't get above 50 below zero. And we all decided when it warmed up to 35 below zero we were going to go out camping. We had a whole bunch of guys that were going to go, but when it happened, 3 of us went out, and we took this toboggan and a pair of skis and a weasel, and we went off into the boondocks. And we were following this old road out there, and it led right down onto this lake. And for a ways out there, everything was fine. And then in the middle of the lake, the snow was all gone. And we didn't know what way we were going, but we picked a spot on the land, and we did find the right way through. Our weasel, which is the Arctic Jeep, except it rides on tracks, and we had one assigned to our group, and the guys were having trouble with the battery, taking it into the motor pool every day trying to figure out what was wrong, so they changed all the electrical components and it still didn't work. So I told the guys, you go disconnect all the wires and I'll come out and find your trouble. So I found the trouble. All the cabling in that vehicle is metal shielded, and at one point where it was clamped, the shielding had worn through and was shorting one of the wires. So these guys really razzed the motor pool people because they couldn't find that. I think we just stopped here to cook lunch. We were bivouacked right by a storage area, and we could go over there and help ourselves to sea rations and whatever else that we wanted. This is just looking out as the sun's going down. We spent the night down here at the gunnery range shack, and they had these 2 huskies out there, and they were the biggest huskies I'd ever seen. And I can't ever figure out how they eat that frozen meat they give out to them. Dogs sled racing is very popular, and every weekend they had races of some kind or another. And we're out here on the Chena Slough there. They use that for their main roadway in the wintertime. This is typical dress even for the most everybody that lived there in Fairbanks. If you notice the length of the shadow, this picture was taken at noon, or when the sun was the highest it gets. Sun rises sometime after 10 o'clock and sits about 2 to 2:30 in the afternoon. It looks like it just jumps up over the horizon, moves over, and drops down. They have all kinds of races, and this is one for the kids here with 2 dogs. This is a dog team just waiting for the race to start. I like the looks of this dog. Now this is getting ready to start a race. They have this winter carnival or celebration there. I can't remember what they call it, but associated with it is a parade. Their army is pretty big there, so a lot of the army units had stuff in the parade. Have you ever heard the joke about trying to sell a refrigerator to the Eskimos? This is the float from one of the appliance stores. This is one of the army units. This is the queen of the festival. This tank had a little trouble manipulating the narrow streets in Fairbanks. I think every time it turned the corner it had to back up a couple of times. I think there was one unit they brought they had to leave out. They couldn't get it in at all. This is the throne out here, and it's built right on the Chena Slough. One of the things, they don't clean the roads when it snows. They just let it pack down, and when it gets a thaw, then they have to come through and use earth-moving equipment to get the snow up, and they pile it up here on the Chena Slough, and they made this throne here ready for the program. One of the things they had here, they raffled off, I think it was a Buick automobile at those days, was worth, I think, $3,500. And they sold $36,000 worth of tickets, and I never could figure out why anybody would want the car. There's no place to drive it. These are some Eskimo dancers, and they're very similar to the native Indian dances in the States here. I can't remember what they call this, but they get a ring of people around a skin, I guess it is, shoulder to shoulder, and it's just like a human trampoline. You see how high they can throw these people. The women get involved in it. These are some of the vehicles that they were testing, and one of the things they were testing was a gasoline-fired block heater. And during the winter, every truck that had one of those on it burned up. The first night I was on charge of quarters, the general come running in there. He says, "Where's the water buckets?" And fortunately, I just read the instructions, so I get him to the water buckets. And he says, "Get the fire department." So I got the fire department, went out, and one of these trucks was on fire out in the back. These are just some of the vehicles that were there that they use in the snow. Hard to see, but that building way in the back you can see has a little platform out in front, and it's 2 steps up. When I got there in December, you walked right straight in, level with the street, into that building. And I was really surprised to find that all the buildings had 2 steps going up after they cleaned the snow off. Can't remember the captain's name, but this was our office where we worked. And this is saying goodbye to Alaska. We were supposed to get up one morning and police up the area and go get on the train and leave. Fortunately, it snowed 4 inches that night, so we didn't have to do the policing. We took the railroad down to Anchorage and out to Whittier, where we caught the boat to come home. These are some pictures taken from the train. Mount McKinley is somewhere along this railroad looking at the south, so I'm not exactly sure which one it is. As we're getting nearer to the coast, ice is breaking up on the river. This is the boat we came down to the States in, to San Francisco from Whittier, Alaska. Being a sergeant, they wouldn't let me do anything, so 5 days on the boat with nothing to do was kind of boring. The only problem was, I don't know how rough this sea is, but I was not really sick, but I wasn't very well all the time I was on that boat. This is sunset as we're coming into San Francisco. Took a few days for us to get discharged from the Army here, and this is Fisherman Wharf in San Francisco. Another view of Fisherman's Wharf. This is on the cable car. This is a picture of Alcatraz. This is in San Francisco when we were getting discharged. These two guys I worked with up there in Alaska, but I can't remember their names at this time. Hunting was a big thing in our day, and we always went out, and usually with a large group. And I can't remember which is which, but either we owned this tent on this end, and Phil Elsie owned the tent on the other end, and so we decided we'd have a canopy made, so we put them both face to face and then spaced them off with this little tent to get in, and we had a stove in there. The little one over here we used as our kitchen. The brown one in the back we used for the bedroom. I remember waking up one night or one morning, and you couldn't hear a sound of anything. And we got out there, and I'm surprised that the ridge poles didn't break. They were bent so far with the snow. This is all of us out on one hunting trip. We went quite often up to Monte Cristo, which is east of Ogden and Huntsville, and this is looking out over the, I think what they call Ogden Valley, where Huntsville is. And you can see the clouds are down in the valley, but clear up where we are. Those mountains that are snow-covered in the background there is Mount Ogden, which is just east of Ogden. And I think probably on the right we can see Ben Lomond. In hunting, you take these little draws like this and position people at the top and the bottom around, and somebody goes down through to try to flush the deer out. And it doesn't look like it, but the deer can hide very readily in this kind of forest. Someplace over there he's coming out the other side. Getting the deer out without a horse became a problem, and so we built this one-wheel deer cart, and it was quite convenient. You could carry a pretty good-sized deer on that cart pretty handily. This is my brother Frank in the front and my uncle Phil Elsie in the back. This is one of the deer we got one year. Most years they had either sex hunt, so you could shoot either doe or bucks. This was a pretty good year this year at deer hunting. Before they had frozen food lockers, we used to set up tables there in our garage, and everybody, that was one of the things you did when you got back from hunting, was to skin and cut up all the deer and take them to the ice house. So this is what we're about to set up to do. Incidentally, deer meat was a major part of our diet when we were kids growing up. Shooting was probably my greatest sport, target shooting that is, and this is the Ogden Rifle and Pistol Club that I belong to. I got my first exposure to target shooting in high school when I was trying out for the rifle team, but I never could get my standing score up high enough to make the team. When I got back to New York, he had a Sperry Rifle Club that shot in a league, so I joined it. When I got down to Fort Bliss, I had all my shooting equipment sent down there, thinking I was going to be there for a while, and joined the El Paso Rifle Club. They shot mostly high-powered rifles that I didn't have. And so with a borrowed rifle and donated ammunition, I'd shoot in the matches, and it displeased some of the people that I always was shot in the high five of the team. In rifle shooting, usually if you're shooting a team, you can have 10 people shoot and the high five count on the team. The two fellows on the left-hand side here were bachelors, and so was I at the time, and we used to travel over Nevada, Colorado, Idaho, and I think we even went to Montana one time to shoot in a match. The one sitting down is Roy Drabble, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But the fellow sitting down in front with the dark glasses on is the one that convinced me I should get married. We did pretty good shooting in the wintertime because we used the Ogden High School rifle range, but we didn't have any place to shoot out doors, so somebody arranged for us this property out here, and we built the range here. This is out digging dirt to build up the firing line. We built this rock wall for the front of the firing line, and that's Ben Lomond Peak in the background. One of the hardest things you have to do when you're shooting is to tell when you're shooting at the right target. So I figured, well, I'll make sure of that. I'll paint all the target frames a different color, and then I'll paint the letters on with a contrasting color so that you can read them, but then you could tell whether you're shooting at the right target or not. But some of the colors I chose were really horrible. I got blue with red, and that strained your eyeballs no end to look at it. This is another either practice or match that we had at the range there. This is out shooting at some other range. This is some of the trophies that we had there. We shot in the Wasatch Rifle League that had teams from Kaysville on the south to Logan on the north. I think this was taken at one of the regional matches that we had, and these thumbhole stocks and everything that are pretty much standard on target rifles today were pretty uncommon in those days. This is the firing line out at that match. These are the trophies that were given out at one of the regional rifle matches. This is some of our rifle club up at the Ogden High School rifle range. We never did conduct any matches outdoors at our range, but we did always have one NRA registered rifle match that we held in the wintertime. This is the advertisement that was put in the Armstrong Sporting Goods window, and down below are all of our awards that we were giving out. I went to the 5th annual National Boy Scout Jamboree in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1960 as part of the National Rifle Association, who conducted the rifle ranges at the Jamboree. This was also the 50th anniversary of scouting in the United States, and also it's the 50th anniversary of the National Rifle Association. It's hard to tell what you've got here, but right in the center there's sort of a horn-shaped thing, and that's the arena where they had their programs. The dark part right above it is the headquarters, and out on the far left there's a little black line, and that's the rifle range. And there's another rifle range up there to the right, but I'm not sure which one I was at. This is the information center, and lost and found and whatever else that you needed was here, and this is the 50th anniversary birthday cake. This avenue of flags, I guess, a lot of activities took place in this area. This is the entrance to the Boy Scout headquarters. That's just a face in the front. This is the banner for the Region 12 of the Boy Scouts of America. Each region and council had their signs and stuff out in front, and I took pictures of some of the more unique ones here. You can't read the sign. This is for Theodore Roosevelt Council, which is in Phoenix, in Arizona. This is the one from Texas. I think these were the most colorful tents. This is an aerial view, and if you look towards the top in the center, there's a little dark spot, and then the arena is out in the back of there, and down over on the left in that dark area is where the headquarters is. This is another aerial view, and it shows all the tents and everything that are jammed into there. Can't remember how many people were there, but there were a lot. This is looking at the camps from the ground. Everything was spread out, and logistics was quite a problem. Each patrol had to pick up their day's supply, and they had to do all their own cooking and everything, and this is one mode of transportation. This is a picture of the washing facilities. Now this is out in front of the range headquarters. They had a lot of Army personnel that assisted on the range, and they got here with transportation. We got to walk. This is all the people that operated the range. This is another view of the people that worked on the range. This is our group that worked together on a certain number of firing points. I don't remember. This is a picture of the firing range. That bench isn't quite strong enough, or just barely strong enough. This is President Eisenhower. He came and visited the camp while we were there. Everybody had to line up and march wherever they were going, if they were going as a troop. And this is one of the groups lining up ready to march out. This is the amphitheater where they had all their programs, and you sat on the grass. Unfortunately, if you didn't get the right spot, you got wet because there were some springs up here on this hill. And so you want to make sure you brought a good tarp to lay down, otherwise you get pretty wet. This is looking back towards that birthday cake and the flags from the top of the amphitheater. Now this is they were marching in for a program at the amphitheater, and as you look you can see them strung all the way back onto the horizon up there as they're marching in. There's lots of people there. Morrill Lofgreen was the scoutmaster that took the Lake Bonneville Council troop here to the Jamboree, and so I would go over and go with their group to all these activities. This is another view of them marching in. They're kind of straggly there. One night at the program they had this fireworks. I don't know exactly where this picture was taken, whether we stopped someplace on the way home or whether it's on the Air Academy base. Morrill Lofgreen got me a free ride on this train coming home, and one of the things they did was run out of milk in the dining car. But when we got to Ogden, everybody had to be on these two cars because they just pushed them off on the side here for us to unload. This is people greeting when we got home. I kept seeing pictures of Bryce and Zion that appeared to have my mother and father in them. And I didn't realize that we had taken a trip down there until I saw this picture with our old 37 Ford. And this is going up to Cedar Breaks. These are pictures of Cedar Breaks. These are pictures in Zion's Park. In the old days, when there wasn't so much traffic, at each one of these windows in the tunnel going out of Zion, you could stop and look out these windows. I think that previous picture was taken out of one of these windows, and that's my father, my mother, and Frank in the picture there. And these are over at Bryce Canyon. I must have made several shots of this because standing up there is my mother and father, and I always looked at them and thought that's who they were, but I never could remember of going there with them. There are a few pictures that were floating around that I just couldn't place, and some of them are mixed in with the Bryce and Zion pictures and everything. This is a trip we took over to Colorado to the Royal Gorge, and it looks like some other places, but all those pictures fit into this set of pictures. So this shows down there in the bottom of the Royal Gorge where the railroad track goes. This is looking down the wall of the canyon. This is a railroad or car that goes down into the bottom of the Royal Gorge from the top. This is looking up to the top of the gorge from the bottom. On the left-hand side, you can see some people hanging on to a rail on the top. This is looking up at the bridge that goes across the canyon here. Now this is the bridge that you can look down into the canyon. That's my dad right in the middle. This looks like a side canyon coming into the Royal Gorge. Another view looking down into the bottom. We apparently drove someplace that was up in the high country because there were lots of pictures of snow. I don't know whether that's one of my brothers and dad over there on that point. Could be. There's a little arch down there in the wall. It's another steep-walled canyon. Frank was going to Weber College at this time, and he was taking geology, and they took a lot of geology trips, and this particular one they were going down to Rainbow Bridge, and so I went along with him, and we came along Highway 89 and took off at the Gap, and this is at the Gap where we took off on a dirt road. This is going out through the desert there. The road was reasonably good for a ways. We had several cars in this caravan. But pretty soon we came to this sign, and the road began to get worse. This is the road. We had to get out and try to find tire marks and stuff on these rocks in order to try to figure out where the road went through here. They're having some kind of car trouble back there. I'm not sure that this is at Rainbow Lodge, but we slept out on the ground in at all of the places that we stayed. We were there down in this trip for nearly a week, and this is waking up in the morning. This is to start our hike to Rainbow Bridge, and out in the background there at the top of the picture are some low rolling hills. These low rolling hills in the background become mountains to us in a little while. Now looking up at those hills, this is up stream from Rainbow Bridge, and there's this little alcove here, and it had a small pond and a spring and things, and this is where we camped. It's also where the wranglers bring their people down and camp down in the bottom here. This is Rainbow Bridge. Rainbow Bridge is quite tall. You can stand the Washington Monument under it. To go home, we went out through Monument Valley to Mexican Hat and Bluff and up that way to come home. It's out in here someplace. We got a couple of the cars stuck in the sand. We came to this nice, smooth, graded road here that was just as straight and smooth as could be, and when we got to the end of it, there was a movie set. Well, I don't know what happened to the pictures of the movie set. These are the two spires at Bluff, and I think we camped our last night here before going home. In 1968, I went to Arizona to help them on a proposal for a heads-up display system. There's one other fellow from New York that went with me, and over Easter, Gene and Nancy and Jim came out, and we went around. And another weekend, I got my brothers to come down. My brother Jack had a boat and meet us at Lake Powell and take us on a boat trip here. And at this time, the dam is about half full. This is another look at the dam. Now this is a view of Gunsight Pass. This is a view of Gunsight Pass before the dam was built. This we took on our river trip. Rainbow Bridge is one of our destinations. They're getting a little fancier up here now that more people come around. Looking straight up under Rainbow Bridge. This is climbing up to get on top of Rainbow Bridge, and at one point you have to climb down this cliff and jump over a little crevice, and one of the fellows was a mountain climber, and he wouldn't let us do it without a safety rope. This is getting down on the wall, and Rainbow Bridge is that rock on the left. This is a picture of us on top of Rainbow Bridge. We didn't have anybody to take a picture from down on the bottom. This is a picture of Navajo Mountain from on top of Rainbow Bridge. We went up a side canyon and climbed up on the top of the ridge, and these are boats out on the main channel. These are some of the narrow canyons that we went up. This is one place we almost lost it. That's a rock that goes straight down there, pretty steep. There's a little bridge up there on top and the deeply colored walls. Another view of Navajo Mountain. This is one of our camps. This is a pool that's at the end of the canyon where we were camped at. This is looking out of kind of a cave-like thing in the wall. When you get to these places where the water is really smooth, you can get these real nice reflections in the water. As we start moving in closer in the waves, we've lost our reflection here. Here's another one of those places where we get the reflections. A little hard to see the water line here, but this is a reflection also. We took a hike up one of these canyons, and it was wading up the river all the way just about. This is 6 of us. On the right-hand side are my brothers and I. That's me on the right, Jack and Tom and Frank, and the other 2 fellows, I can't remember their names. The tall one's from New York, and the other one was just a fellow that worked in the lab. One of the things we came up here was to see this arch. And these Indian writings that are on the wall. This is just a side canyon with the water coming in. I'm not sure whether this is looking back at that same arch or another one. This is the boat tied up here. This is one of the canyons we went up, and we had to push the boat up here with poles to try to keep it from hitting the walls. Back at the canyon that we had just come through. Never seen this color in a cactus before. It's quite unique. These pictures were stuck in with this trip, but they really should have been in our trip to Perea, because we came here and stopped at Glen Canyon Dam on the way up there. I never could figure out what happened to these pictures. This is looking up at the Visitors Center from down on Glen Canyon Dam. This is looking along the power plant face there. This is looking up the dam face from the power plant. This is a picture inside the power plant. This is looking, I guess, downriver from the dam. This is a close-up of the pegs that are driven in the wall to keep it from crumbling off. This is looking up the lakeside from the top of the dam. This is looking up at the dam from down at an observation point. This is a closer view of the dam. I think this is looking downriver from the observation point. This is a little town that Mom always put under the Christmas tree, and each one of those houses has a light in it so that they can see them at night, and it makes it quite a pretty base for the Christmas tree. This is the beginning of our mill out in West Ogden. This is putting up the first building that we had there. And this is our first planer. Wasn't very big, and some of the boards we had trouble getting them through. One year we had a really heavy snowstorm, and this is the Ogden River at the park, and this is a footbridge across the river. These guys up here got gaffing hooks to keep the debris from collecting on the jamming up against the bridge. This is a picture in 15th Avenue or 15th South in Salt Lake City. And over here on the left you can see the little geyser that's coming out of the manhole. They dammed this street up just to keep the whole countryside from flooding. The first year I went to New York, I went up to the University of Rochester to take a summer course in optics, and this is Rochester as we're coming in on the airplane. One note I should make is that I made many trips to Rochester like Alan does to Phoenix. But while we were there over the weekend, we rented a car and we went to out to the Letchworth State Park there in upstate New York. This is one of the streams coming into the river. This is looking down in the river. This is another side stream that's coming into the river. Now this shows waterfall in the back, and if you can look real closely down here at the bottom, you can see how narrow the canyon has gotten there for the river to flow through. This is a closer view of that waterfall. We cut it at the right time with the train going over the railroad trestle. This is some new construction that was going on at the University of Rochester, and you can see the town of Rochester in the background. The rest of these pictures are all of flowers, most of which are wildflowers, and I don't know the names of very many of them, but this one is known as the elephant's head. This is zoomed in on it. You can see the trunk and the ears of the elephant's head. Most of these early pictures here were taken in Henry's Fork in Utah. This is the other one that I know. This is a wild geranium. I don't remember where these are, but they're in somebody's garden. This shows somewhat the scale. when I first were taking pictures of the flowers, I had a +3 lens, and I had to measure the distance and look up the focus on a chart. These are flowers around the house that the Harpers had planted around the house that we had on Augusta in Phoenix. This is the gardenia that we had there at the house. This is a passion vine flower, and I think it's my favorite flower of all. This is a century plant that we found in bloom along the road someplace. This was another one of the plants that they had there on Augusta. I'll finish off here with a couple of pictures of cactus flowers.